Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, the CEO of Boardroom Resources, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the show. We have a great show today. We actually have the institutional investor Vanguard here to share their views on board and engagement. And joining me from Vanguard is Glenn Booraem, who's the principal and head of corporate governance for Vanguard. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you, TK.
So Vanguard today oversees approximately $3 trillion, and that's with a T, trillion dollars of global assets. And that means that you own approximately 5% of certainly every company in the U.S., okay? Pretty significant holdings, I might add. And because of this position, it certainly gives you the right to have opinions about companies and boards. At the same time, you're an index fund, which means that people believe that you'll hold them whether they're good or bad, which is, I guess, a factual statement. But it does give you the right, okay, to let people know when you think change is important or when you aren't happy about something. It seems like you guys have stepped that sort of, not activist, but that voice up a little louder. Tell me if that's the case, and what can companies expect from Vanguard going forward?
Sure. No, you're exactly right that we've turned up the volume a little bit on our messaging on engagement, but communicating with the companies that our funds invest in is nothing new for Vanguard. In fact, for almost 15 years now, we've been reaching out to both CEOs and boards of the companies we invest in to communicate our thinking on issues, mostly at a principle level. But in recent years, we've gotten more specific in some of the things we're looking for from companies. We've reached out to individual companies with very specific concerns, and more recently, earlier this year, reached out to 500 of our largest portfolio investments to really encourage them to engage more directly with us and other large investors.
You and I had the benefit of serving on a U.S. Chamber event, and it was interesting. You were on stage, we were on stage with some other proxy advisors and some other governance experts. And when we went down the line and I asked what was the most important, factor going forward, if you guys could wave a magic wand, every person on that panel said shareholder engagement was the most critical topic moving forward. And is that...
Yeah, no, we definitely see engagement as an important part of the equation going forward. The most important part, we think, is really the composition of the board. Who serves on investors' behalf is really the critical issue that we see, and engagement is a really effective way for us to develop a better understanding of who those folks are who are on the board, how they serve on our behalf, and how they connect that service to the company strategy and longer-term value.
That's a perfect segue into the second thing I wanted to talk to you about. Due to your owning everybody and so much of everybody, you, again, have the right to be a player in the governance space and helping determining what happens. I've tracked you in your communications, and I know Vanguard has 6 principles of governance that I just wanted to touch on, because we want to touch on these in a second. First, independent oversight and more broadly appropriate board composition. Accountability, management to the board, board to the shareholders. Shareholder voting rights that are consistent with economic interests. annual director elections and minimal anti-takeover devices, sensible compensation tied to performance, and the one that you were just talking about is shareholder engagement. So I want to talk about composition, and then we'll talk about the last one, shareholder engagement. So in the board composition, there seems to be such focus today on the matrix, making sure you have these skills. It's almost a box check. People want it in the proxy. The proxy's big enough as it is for people to read, but I understand that it's a point. But I think people are overemphasizing the point of the matrix and shouldn't take comfort if boxes are checking. A board makeup is not a science, it's more of an art, and it really requires leadership. Talk about Vanguard's views with respect to matrix and board leadership and board composition.
Sure, we absolutely don't want board composition to become a check the box exercise, right? The board occupies a very central role in governance on shareholders' behalf, and in order to serve as an effective check on management, in order to serve as an effective overseer of risk management and strategy, they've got to bring a complement of skills, background, and experiences that matter and that are aligned with the company's strategy for how it delivers value over the long term. So what we're really looking for from a board composition standpoint is a well-articulated connection between what the company's strategy is, what the requisite needs on board service are, what the company needs from directors going forward, and how that translates into an ongoing refreshment process of the board. Because at the end of the day, it really comes down to us for who's in that boardroom serving on shareholders' behalf. And we ultimately need to bring together an effective team of directors that have complementary skills that coalesce as a team and are able to work together, have appropriate independent leadership, independent of management. And that's really hard to assess strictly looking on paper, reading the proxy statement and looking at pictures. So that's really where the value of engagement comes into play for us. Having the opportunity to sit across the table or talk to directors and understand their process and how the board collectively as well as individual directors bring that value to bear.
You mentioned refreshment. Refreshment is certainly growing in the popularity as far as discussions go about board composition. I always look back at PwC's annual board survey, and it's interesting that when asked the question, are there directors on your board that should be replaced, that number is actually going up, okay? I think it hit 33% this year as far as who should be replaced. People don't the directors believe that there should be refreshment. They aren't necessarily in favor of term limits. But I would think refreshment in the sense of making sure that somebody has come off an active career and that is current with what's going on would be critically important to you guys.
Yeah, and I think what that translates into is a desire on our part for boards to have rigorous evaluation processes, right? The automatic either term limits or mandatory retirement ages are a really rough way to get at refreshment. What we'd like to see in addition to those is rigorous evaluation processes that both assess what the company needs, what the board needs at any point in time, along with what the existing directors bring and how their performance has been. So it's not necessarily just a failing of current directors to live up to expectations. It may in fact be that the needs of the board and the needs of the company are changing. So pairing an effective evaluation process with the development of not just today's skills matrix, but the skills that are going to be required for the board to take the company through the next 5, 10, 20 years is really where we're focused on. And it's less about refreshment per se than ensuring that at any given point in time, the board represents the best set of directors to oversee share owners' interests.
Yeah, key word there was rigorous, because if you look at the percentages, everybody's doing some form of board evaluation. Even those that are doing rigorous don't always have the leadership or the courage to make a change.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the biggest challenge that we have facing the evaluations. But hopefully, every year it gets better, and hopefully with continued focus that will be the case. So we talked about board composition, now let's talk to engagement, okay? So your chairman and CEO, Bill McNabb, gave one of the best speeches on engagement that I've ever read. I didn't hear it, but I had the chance to read it. He gave it at the Lazard's 2015 director event. When I read the speech in total, it almost seemed like that he was focusing on the issue of the board's attitude, meaning he said there's all ranges of ways to do shareholder engagement, from introductory videos to face-to-face meetings and all that's in between. But the sense of the message seemed to be, listen, we're looking to make sure that boards have the right attitude, that they understand that this communication is important, and we're open to all forms and to learn about what is the best way to engage, but we want to see some effort. So did I translate, do you think I translated that speech right, or was there some other message that I missed?
No, I think you've got it right on. In our letter to boards in February of this year, we made the point, we think very clearly, that it's not about how companies engage, it's that they engage that's important to us. So an openness to share owner perspectives on a wide range of issues, whether they be governance or compensation or broader strategic issues, we think helps the board serve their oversight role. Right? We expect boards to exercise informed oversight of management, and one, we think, important constituency to incorporate views from is that of share owners. Particularly in our case, where the bulk of our exposure tends to be in index funds, we're going to be practically permanent holders. So we come to the discussion with a decidedly long-term view, and it's important for us to share that perspective with directors. But I think it's also important as we have those discussions, and we're seeing the best companies incorporate this as we're talking to them more frequently. We can talk about governance, we can talk about compensation, we can talk about the composition of the board, but each of those things is only important in the service of the overall strategy of the company to deliver value. Right? We're at Vanguard, we're not in the governance business, we're not in the compensation business, we're in the investment business to deliver value to our shareholders. So what we expect from the boards of the companies that we're investing in is that they have that same long-term value orientation to how they structure compensation, how they think about the next board member that they need. So for us, it's all about how all of the governance, compensation, board factors roll up in support of that cohesive strategy.
Well, Glenn, Vanguard has always been a great role model, as far as I'm concerned, for a institutional indexed fund that helps companies get better. Okay, so if everybody would, I think, follow the model that you guys have created, it would be an easier place to do business and probably a better results. But I want to thank you for taking the time to come in and join us. And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week to take a look at another critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.